here. Okay. So hi, everyone. It's great to be here this evening. And we'll just dive right in this evening. And so Gurani Anjali, as an approach, was really inclusive, and she drew inspiration from different figures like Sri Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda, but really mainly her teaching revolve around classical yoga. So Patanjali yoga and what is later known as Raja Yoga. And as we will explore this evening, she also emphasized quite a bit of embodiment. And I'm drawing this presentation, as Dr. Chappell mentioned, mainly on her writing, as well as a recording dated September of 1980. So pranayama was really a key practice in the Yoga Anandashram. And I'm going to use the term breath as a broad term, so it encapsulates both prana and also the breath functions. So we'll explore the role of the breath in Gurani Anjali's teaching, and I'll draw a few themes that came up from her writings and the presentation. So I thought it would just be nice to start by just hearing her voice momentarily.
In every activity, in every coming and going, are you feeling that power going and coming with you? It's always going and coming with you. You are never left alone. You always have a friend right there. Never alone. It goes with you and it comes with you. It goes and it's always there.
So before we'll dive to the themes, I just want to highlight kind of two aspects of her teachings that were really prominent throughout the recordings and her writings. And one is her use of texts. So she really uses a lot of classical texts from the Vedas to the Upanishads to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, but really without quite quoting them specifically. So really using her creative way to bring these teachings into daily experience. And the second is, as we see in this kind of brief quote here, is really raising questions that evoke an experience to the practitioner. So that was two things that she used throughout. And yeah, can be some puzzling questions that really leave you pondering. So the third theme that comes up is the superiority of the breath. So treating the breath as superior. And one quite famous story from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is a story of the argument between different body faculties. And they are arguing about their superiority, who is the most important body function. And it's decided that they would each leave the body for a specific period of time. So, for example, sight and speech leave the body, and the body continues to leave. But when the breath is about to leave, of course, all the body faculties have to admit that the breath is superior, and they call him Lord, please do not depart. And Gurani Anjali tells this story in her own words, of course, and really highlighting that the body can't contain the force of the breath. So the superiority of the breath, we can't hold the breath in for too long, and we can't hold the breath out for too long. And another discourse from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishads mentions the breath is the immortal one. So this is one theme that is highlighted in her teachings. And the second one, quite different. I kind of see them as a little bit of an opposite approaches to practice. That is kind of what I resonated with in her teachings as well. So this is a theme as breath as sacred, and she really encouraged to treat the breath with dependency and with sacredness. And I'll read her little quote here because it's so beautiful. Let me breathe you in so that I may be filled with the sacredness of life, so that I may speak of you, so that I may speak to the whole world of how great you are. You purify my mind, you strengthen my body so that I may speak of you. speak to your breath, she encourages. It is a devata. So a little bit of a devotional aspect to treat the breath as your God, as your chosen deity. And another aspect to that she brings in is, of course, it's a theme that parallels teachings from the Atharva Veda, for example, which kind of says, homage to prana, in whose control is this all, who has been Lord of all, in whom all stands firm. So she really encourages to treat the breath with adoration and love. And to quote her, she says, not to treat the breath as a guard or a policeman. And I find this really interesting. So not forcing the breath. And I love that because it's quite different from what we kind of think about with Hatha Yoga, pranayama practices of manipulating prana and forcing the prana up, the nadis and the, So I find it a little bit different approach. And another aspect in this regard that she talks about is criticism a little bit about modern practitioners. And I found it even a little bit more relevant today, perhaps, that she mentions that people like to seek the practice of pranayama merely for amusement or to feel good sensations. And I think this is really highlighted today when we use a practice of pranayama, a little bit like a tranquilizer or a tool to regulate our nervous system, as it's often said. And she really stresses that if the sacredness of the breath is not upheld, then there will be no fruits to the practice of pranayama. And I found it really interesting. There will be no progression in the path of yoga without upholding the sacredness of the breath. And I'd like to weave another kind of theme in our teachings together. I think it comes in here, and it's the concept of rita. So rita, it parallels words in English like rhythm or ritual, and it means truth or order. And in Vedic times, it also denoted the time where the ritual was completed and cosmic order was attained. And she also uses the word ritu, which means flow or season. And she brings these terms together in relation to the breath. And she relates it to the movements within the microcosm of the body, to the movements of the macrocosm. And the way that she weaved that in is really through the embodiment of rita, of that idea of truth, of movement, of flow. And she does that in a really interesting way. So bring together breath, mind purification, and rita. So she brings in the kleshas. So the kleshas, as we know from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, are the afflictions of the mind, or klishta vrittis are simply saying our negative thoughts, which are rooted in 5, saying avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. So ignorance, I amness or ego, attraction or aversion, and clinging to life or fear of death. And she suggests tracing the kleshas back to the sensations in the body. And for example, fear, she asks, where would you feel that sensation in the body? And when we can trace that sensation, she suggests coming back to the flow of the breath, the coming and going of the breath, to trace back the kleshas to the root cause. And from Yoga Sutra 2.4, we know kind of the source to be avidya. And she says, not knowing who you are and from who you are not. And this is tied together with the worship of breath to find the truth in life, come back to rita. So I saw it as 3 different kind of themes coming together. There was the superiority of the breath, because of course, practices within the yoga Ananda ashram, of course, had classical practices of pranayama, like Nadi Shodhana and the Kumbhakas, and they were quite forceful. They sounded like that in her recording. So, and then there was a theme of the tenderness, the sacredness of the breath. And the practice can just be watching the breath. And this is a pranayama practice of embodying. And then she brings it into also purifying the mind and embodying the sense of vritta. And she also mentions that one of the results of practicing is that practicing this and uncovering the kleshas is that one becomes shining like the sun, which kind of parallels also the sutras that that state of sattvic that is a result of the practice of pranayama. So she weaved in the themes together, and hopefully I demonstrated her creative ways that she brought it all together to an embodied experience. And she often said that yoga is to live by, and it's not for amusement. It's a serious work, which requires individual responsibility. The responsibility to experience your existence, the responsibility to reconstruct the kleshas, to reconstruct and purify the mind, and then to reconnect back to the rhythm of life, to the rhythm of the breath, because life is essentially breath. And I love this poem that she wrote that I think really brings it all together. Live yoga every day. Create your life in a special way. Leave samskaras. Leave the past. Watch the gunas as they pass. Feel your breath moving in your body. Feel your breath. So thank you all for listening, and I'll just open it up for any comments or questions. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. That was very, very beautiful. Nalini, you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was very fascinated by this talk about, prana or breath. And I, coming from the Hindu aspect, was that breath ever codified or substantiated in iconography and sculpture as it is in Hinduism, in South India particularly?
In different traditions, or?
Yeah, in Hinduism.
In Hinduism. Well, if you trace it back, it was also referred to as a god in the Vedas. So I think it was, of course, also, definitely in iconography. I don't know, Dr. Chappell, do you know more to add to that, or?
Well, we have those medieval and actually contemporary charts that show the flows of energy and the nadis that I think reflect the breath, either the effects of the breath or the breath actually itself. But I'm curious, Nalini, which images are you thinking of that represent the breath?
Oh, yeah.
itself?
In South India, we have what is called as prana devaru. Prana is breath. And the prana is very much worshipped even in the Sandhya Vandana. What do you call that? Morning oblations that a boy does every morning and evening. So we think of the prana, pana, samana, udana, and so on and so forth. And that is crystallized as prana devaru. There is a figure, and it is almost the same as Hanuman, but Hanuman is slightly different, although a prana devaru is also depicted like Hanuman with a big tail. So Hanuman also depicts fearlessness, right? And not necessarily breath. But in South India, especially with the coming of Madhva's philosophy and Ramanuja's philosophy, comes Pranadevaru more than it is in Shankara's philosophy or Advaita. And it is worshipped as a shrine, hundreds of shrines for Pranadevaru, as you go by, and which is very sacred.
Well, hopefully you and I will be in India sometime and you can bring me to one of those temples. I would love to see those shrines. So, yeah, wonderful. Okay, Malang, you have a question?
Yes, mine is not really a question, just comment. Is actually, I appreciate Karen's emphasize, the pranayamas for the Western understanding, like the brief. But if you feel like to doing more, the deconstructing, what is the pranayama mean? Actually, like just the question earlier. Actually, you should look at. I would say that's if you look at the Ashtanga, which is, the eighth fact, you will know that's how we understand pranayama. It's not how today we understand the body. The body in the Indian knowledge system can be talked about, if you understand by Panchkosha, which is the 5 body. So you will know in Indian tradition, the Western, the body is not how like contemporary understand the body. So even the pranayama, it's not how just we understand before we get like the mindfulness in Buddhism tradition is the same. The sati, it's not just about your breathe, coming back to your body and mind. No, if you have to understand Indian cosmology and also epistemology to understand how we understand body, because the Western understanding the body and mind, it's already reductionist kind of understanding. So if you still kind of practice just the breath and the body, it doesn't really achieve what is Ashtanga, which is how going to the stage and even going to the Atman. You don't really go into those even want to understand what's the body mean for the Sankhya tradition. It's still have a different differences based on the practice, the meditation on layers. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, definitely. And what was really interesting in her teaching is that it is based upon, the cosmology and, the ontology of yoga, though it is really accessible to a Western audience. So it is, well, it's put differently into words, but I don't think that part was overlooked in her teachings, but definitely different phrasing. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, of course.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to Coulur's paper, Coulur Caulfield, who it's very late. She's in Florida.
It's all right. I'm ready. I'm ready for all of you. I've been enjoying this so very much. I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. Share. All right. Let me see. Are you seeing all my notes or can you just see the presentation?
And I want to acknowledge that this photograph was shared by Chandani, who
looking good.
Yeah.
You guys hear me okay?
Yes. I just want to, by way of introductions, state that this photograph was shared by Chandani, who is on the phone with us, and Chandani is the daughter of Gurani Anjali.
Oh, that's so amazing. Well, welcome, and I hope to do her justice. So Karen really set the stage and Dr. Chappell really set the stage, and so I don't really need to give you too much more background than that. But what I will say is that upon first listening to the October 1980 recordings that I listened to from the YAA archive of Gurani Anjali, or as she is sometimes lovingly referred to, Garuma, I was really immediately struck by the accessible and yet like poetic manner in which she delivers these meditations and these profound teachings. At once she's sort of able to come across really gentle and loving, as you might have heard on the recording that Karen played, the little piece that she played. And yet also she comes across as very direct and decisive and clear at the same time. In the 2 meditations that I listened through, she covers topics as vast as the nature of the infinite, and yet also as subtle as the dynamic relationship between God and our breath and prana. And she somehow manages to share these teachings in a really conversational and lyrical sort of manner that draws the listener, the meditator in. And in so doing, she really shapes the listening in such a way that her message and her teachings come through in a really organic and effortless manner. And so the entire experience of listening to these recordings and listening to her guided talks and teachings is one of immersion and flow, where the listener is completely transported to this state of seamless, embodied presence and curiosity and wonder, kind of much like Karen sort of said. Her teachings really are one of embodiment and one that's meant to be experienced. And so if you haven't listened to her recordings, I really highly encourage you to find a way to do that. And so, I listened to 2 different recordings, and they covered the gamut of the nature of the infinite, of the process and importance of meditation and how we're supposed to approach meditation and go about it. And then also, she also kind of, in the second meditation, she presents prana and the breath as being intricately tied and related to God, into the divine, in a really seamless way. And so the first one that I listened through, from October of 1980, she kind of comes out the gate and asks a really important question. She says, did you meditate yesterday? Or Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, Sunday. She does not hold back. But she does this in this really kind of casual, very disarmingly casual, interrogative way. But she right away kind of draws us in and kind of creates this question of, what is my relationship with meditation? What is our relationship with meditation? And in speaking so plainly and purposefully, she's kind of very gently confronting us in a very loving way with facing the ways that we are or we aren't prioritizing our meditation practice in our day-to-day lives. And she's also inviting us to, in that moment, ponder our relationship to our very own meditation practice. And so she kind of gets to the point right away. She says, it only takes a moment to be strong, and it only takes a moment to get weak. It only takes a moment to be perfect, and it only takes a moment to be imperfect, and that's all it takes. And she says, how many moments have passed by? And she's really in this referring to the very kind of easy way that it is to put aside our meditation practice for other things, for, our day-to-day lives, our obligations, and that it's these momentary decisions that we make where we can be in intention and in our practice, or we can fall off that wayside. And she says to meditate every single day should be your desire, and to come away from these worldly affairs, to sit and be still and know. And she emphasizes that you have to do that. You have to do that. And she kind of goes a little bit deeper in her talk in this lesson about this world of affairs that she references that has that tendency to pull us out of our practice. She says that it's always trying to pull us away from our meditation practice by calling us into external worldly action. She kind of cautions us that it's important that we stay present to that temptation to get pulled away from our practice by this temptation to kind of get caught up in that cycle of doing. Whether it's, a teacher or a guide, she also kind of highlights that, outside of just that temptation to do, the question becomes, are we relying on somebody else rather than ourselves to hold ourselves accountable to our practice and to every single day creating that time and that space? She says too that, beyond these external complications that might take us out of our practice or might cause us to fall out of our practice, that there are internal pressures as well. That, so oftentimes when we sit in our practice, we feel restless, we feel uncomfortable, we might get bored. And that at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that we really don't know what to do in these moments of stillness, because we're so accustomed to the external world of affairs telling us what to do and when to do it and how to do it. So it sort of becomes this vicious cycle where the external world is constantly trying to pull us out of our practice into action and into doing. And because of that, we sort of become reliant on that, the external world telling us what to do and how to do it. So we're not really very skillful in being still and in being in our seat. She sort of takes a pause back and comforts us, though, by saying that if you have desire, you can create your life anew. It takes a strong, strong desire. It takes a strong desire to realize yourself. And in this, what I think she's really getting at, she's sort of reminding us, and again, that sort of gentle, loving way, that it's really important that we take personal ownership of and responsibility for our own daily practice. And that, it comes from this strong desire, from this place of steadfastness, commitment, intention, and integrity. And it's really this integrity, this commitment is important if we are to truly realize our desire to know ourselves fully and to overcome those external pressures that she cautions us against. And one of the reassuring things that she addresses in this meditation is that through our showing up every single day in our practice and just doing it over and over again and sitting with the discomfort and sitting with the uncomfortability, the uncertainty, that over time, we start to kind of get used to it. We start to kind of relax a little bit around these external pressures, this anxiety of not knowing what to do. She says, once you feel the pressure of, and there's no more anxiety of you're getting bored, then some things begin to change and you move internally. So we kind of just have to like show up and suck before we can show up and shine. You know, we kind of have to be willing to take our seat, you know, to do our practice, no matter what comes up with it, and just keep doing it over and over, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like she says, every single day. That's how we, you know, progress on our path to realization. And so, you know, in this, she sort of brings us back to the beginning of her teaching. You know, she asks us how we've been in our practice, reminds us that there is this inner calling. In fact, she says there is another calling, an inner calling, which is also calling you. You hear it, and that's why you're here. And it's a beginning. It's a beginning. And what I love about this is, just as at the, you know, earlier portion of the meditation of the talk, she says, you know, it only takes a moment to you know, fall off the wayside, to fall out of your practice. She's also reminding us that it does also only take a moment to begin again, that in every single moment we kind of have that choice, that opportunity to either, you know, fall to those external pressures or even internal pressures, or to be in wise action and choice and to begin again, to listen to that inner calling. And so at this point in the meditation, she transitions in a very beautiful, sort of seamless way. And her prose takes on this almost kind of like biblical quality, or Tao Te Ching sort of essence, you know, kind of like Karen said, she sort of references all of these other texts. And she does this, you know, as she transitions into talking about the nature of the infinite. So she's sort of already talked about meditation and why it's important. And now she's, you know, going big with the nature of the infinite. She says, where one sees nothing else, hears nothing else, understands nothing else, that is the infinite. Where one sees something else, hears something else, understands something else, that is the finite. And she says, the infinite indeed is below, above, behind, before, right, and left. It is indeed all of this. I am all this. Self is all of this. And she, you know, again, in this sort of beautiful, poetic way, is presenting this massive idea that, you know, the infinite, the I am, the great divine, however you might see it, is truly everywhere in all things. The I am, as well as the self, is pervasive and ubiquitous everywhere in all directions. And so in this way, she's sort of demonstrating that, in essence, all is one. And that when we seek out the infinite, the I am, or even the self, we are essentially seeking the same thing. So she's sort of presenting this idea that in sitting in our meditation practice and seeking out, you know, the journey of the self through the self to the self, we are seeking connection with the infinite. We are seeking connection with divine. And then she kind of continues in that, you know, beautiful sort of almost, like I said, like prose-like way. She says, he who perceives, sees, and understands this, loves the self, delights in the self, reveals in the self, revels in the self, rejoices in the self. He becomes a Swaraj, a ruler, a self-ruler. He is Lord and Master in all the worlds. But those who think differently than this have other beings for their rulers. And so kind of here again, she's kind of reminding us again, those other beings, that's that caution once again of that external world, you know. So by being in our practice, right, we start to know the self, we reveal, we revel in the self, rejoice in the self, and we become a master, right? But if we continue to allow ourselves to fall to those external pressures, we have other rulers than ourselves. And yet, you know, it's this warning, this gentle warning about wise perception and the importance of it that we cultivate through our daily meditation practice that makes the difference, right? That allows us to discern. And so we must practice. And essentially her final message here is that the infinite resides within each and every one of us. And it's through our daily meditation practice, through taking our seat Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that we develop the capacity to touch the infinite that resides within and to abide in it, to rest in it, just as it does within each and every one of us. And so she invites us to sit and be still and meditate, that there is that inner calling, and it's calling you, it's calling me, and that it's saying be still and sit quietly. And so the second meditation that I listened to, I'll be a little more brief on this one, because a lot of it is pranayama practice. And like Karen did such a beautiful job talking about the pranayama of Gurani Anjali. But what I will say is that she opens up this meditation in a really interesting way. And kind of very like, she just conversationally is like, hey, did you hear the wind blowing all night? And when I was listening to it, I was like, okay, yeah, you're talking about the wind, the weather. All right, that's cool, I guess. Not super relevant, but fine. But it's so, again, it's like, it's deceptive, it's purposeful, it's gentle, and yet it's so pointed. She says, did you hear the wind blowing all night? Talking away all night. Did you hear yourself in the wind? Where am I? Where am I? Where's my home? And at this point, I'm like, ooh, okay, you're not really just talking about the wind. And so it's this sort of simple inquiry that she poses that makes it really apparent that she's referring to the winds within. She's referring to prana, is what she's talking about. Did you hear yourself in the wind? Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Where's my home? She's sort of launching into this lyrical, dreamlike, very vast description of the myriad ways in which she says God moves as the wind. She refers to this wind as the vehicle, as of the vehicle of the germ of the world, of the vehicle of the universe's monarch, or the vital spirit and deity. So again, it's very clear it's not just the wind outside, right? She's referencing the importance of this connection between prana, the winds within, and the universe's monarch of God. She says, traveling on the paths of air, no single day does he take rest or slumber. Where did he spring from? In what region came he? His voice is heard. His shape is ever formless. Let us adore this wind. And, you know, this is where I see that connection between like the breath and prana, right? And the infinite of God, you know, because she says, traveling on the paths of air, right? On the paths of my breath, of our breath. No single day does he take rest or slumber. And neither does our breath. My breath is constantly moving in and out through my body. Where did he spring from? In what region came he? His voice is heard. And if I pause in my meditation practice and I be with my breath, I can hear my breath. And perhaps I can also hear that, you know, universe's monarch. I can hear that which is divine riding along, being carried by the vehicle of my breath, of prana. And so I think it's that let us adore this wind. That's that invitation to sit in meditation, to sit in pranayama practice. And at this point in the meditation, she launches into a very robust, like 25-minute long pranayama practice. You know, it incorporates a lot of kumbhakas, of breath retentions that are guided, alongside almost exclusively led parakas, which are inhalations, and richakas, which are exhalations. So she's really much guiding the cadence of this pranayama practice all the way through. There's a lot of very long kumbhakas of retentions. Ultimately, this is a very fiery pranayama practice. And I think that's not a mistake. I think she does this on purpose. It's one that would certainly be contraindicated for certain populations, but for someone who is seeking that almost like revelatory experience of connecting with the divine, I think that's what she's going for here. So altogether, I think these practices, sort of fiery practices, she does on purpose as a means of landing the importance and the power of the breath, of breath practice, and invites the practitioners to experience firsthand this immense power of the breath, of the prana, the winds within that she refers to, and through it, the power of the infinite, for whom it serves as a vehicle. And so, you know, ultimately, after listening through these two recordings of Gurani Anjali several times over, it came really clear to me just how deep and personal her grasp on yoga philosophy was. She's constantly referencing, you know, these texts, and she's landing it in a purely embodied way, in a way that's experiential. Which I think is sort of the point, that, you know, these philosophies are meant to be experienced and embodied. And she's landing them in a way that lands not just in the minds, but in the hearts of her devoted students. And she speaks of these teachings in such a way that they carry gravity, that the immensity of their purpose shines through. And she does this in this, again, just very gentle, loving way. And I think it's through this foundation of love, this way that she delivers her teachings, that is most important, because, with love, everything is possible. With love, perhaps even the greatest of skeptics and the most meditatively challenged among us have the possibility of glimpsing that power of the infinite within that she refers to. We have that possibility of sitting in wonder and reverence at its feet, and to feel its abundant presence in all things and in each other, and in ourselves. And so that was my takeaway from listening to just these 2 recordings of Gurani Anjali. And so I'll stop sharing my screen. I can figure out how to do that. There we go. And open up to questions or comments if we have a little bit of time.
So I'm wondering if, let's see. Maybe Glenn and Teresa want to say something before we go to our next speaker.
Hi. It's very nicely done. Also, Karen, very nicely done. We've spent a lot of time with Gurani Anjali. So this is very heartwarming. And a phrase earlier in your presentation that came to mind that was a favorite of Guru Ma's from early on was to honor that one without a second. The one pointedness where there are no, and some of the presentation material that you put up was based in that unity, that unified experience where there are no things, there are no others, there's nothing else. The one without a second, and she would do it with sort of a regal posture, the one without, the worshipfulness that was mentioned earlier, the one without a second, so that we would experience the way she breathed, the way she stood in a sacred way, in reverence, but with power also, with that Shakti, all at the ready, 100% attached, 100% detached, both. You can't live without being attached. There's no way, you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't get up and walk, you couldn't cross the street without attachment. But 100% attached, also 100% detached, coming from that oneness, from that space of reverence and knowledge. She said everybody is self-realized. Some know it, some don't. That was the difference that she saw, and she was there to remind people, look what's there, look what's there, And sometimes the pranayama was very rigorous. And the way I say it is, the mind rides on the wings of the breath. You do enough pranayama, the mind takes its proper place in the back seat sometimes. She said, she says, you only think when you need to. And as Americans, we're like, what? Didn't Descartes say, all our references that she had us study all this stuff too, so that we would understand what we were standing on. And she'd go, why are you always walking? Americans walk around with such long horse faces. She would say, why aren't you smiling all the time? And she was delightful. She loved playing little pranks and jokes, and it was a delight.
Yeah.
And as a guru's job is to make you see what you're standing on, because you don't see what's under your feet. Guru's job is to either entice you off with the carrot, bhakti songs, spirit, let's sing together, let's dance and celebrate, or the stick, give you a good shove. She's gonna show you what you're standing on under your feet, get you to move off of it so that you see it. And that's the whole point of transformative, experiential teachings.
Yeah, that's beautiful, beautiful. So let's bring it home with Christine.
Okay, and let's see, share. Okay, so can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to honor Gurani Anjali today. The Sanskrit word dharana with the long A can mean concentration. The word dharana with the short A can mean to keep in remembrance, memory. In the act of listening to the words of Gurani Anjali and words about her, we are participating in an act of both concentration and of remembrance. Christopher Chappell writes in Raja Yoga and the Guru sets forth the principles and procedures for spiritual practice, but the doing lies in the hands of the doer. No one other than oneself can bestow spiritual accomplishments. As Gurani Anjali would say, the power of the Guru is to pull everything out of you. This brings to mind for me the culminating scene from the movie The Wizard of Oz. The main character, a young girl named Dorothy, has been searching all over Oz for help to find her way back home to Kansas. She has been searching with the assistance of a scarecrow, a tin man, and a cowardly lion. Certainly a metaphor for Jnana Yoga, the scarecrow, Bhakti Yoga, the tin man, and Karma Yoga, the lion, and Dorothy representative Raja Yoga, and the good witch Glinda playing the role of the guru. So a little spoiler alert, here's some of that final dialogue from that movie. Dorothy says, "If I ever go looking for my heart's desire again, I won't look any further than my own backyard, because if it isn't there, I never really lost it to begin with. Is that right?" Glinda says, "That's all it is." And the Scarecrow says, "But that's so easy. I should have thought of it for you." And the Tin Man says, "I should have felt it in my heart." And Glinda replies, "No, she had to find it out for herself." Dorothy discovers that she had the power to return to Kansas the whole time. Gurani Anjali tells us the power of the Guru is to pull everything out of you. The good witch Glinda acting as Dorothy's guru, pulling the answer from her. Dorothy must find the answer within herself. When Dorothy's inner revelation finally came, Guru Glinda bestowed Dorothy with her very own mantra, "There's no place like home." And so the story ends, Dorothy happily finding her way back to a place called home. My paper that I wrote on Gurani Anjali was primarily based on a recording of her words to her students, recorded on a hot summer day, August 10th, 1980. So the following is an abridged excerpt from that recording. Gurani Anjali tells us, "We don't see our thinking. The mind is not seeing. And because it is not seeing, there is that desperate anxiety. So the mind that has a mind of its own, where are you going to locate it? Where are you going to find it? How is it held? It is held in the flesh. You're painting your intentionality, and that takes determination and willpower. When you have that form desire to hold, then it is held. Other than it, that is not held. It can never be held. But it always goes not into nothingness. It always goes into a place. It is never without a place. It is always wandering, always going to a place and then coming away from a place, and then going back into a place and then coming back and going again into a place and coming and going and coming and going constantly, constantly. How do you stop that? Do you want to stop that? Do you want to stop it? What would you stop? The going and coming? It's always going, and it's always coming back, but it's always going to a place and coming back into a place, going to a place and coming back to a place. When I listen to these words of Gurani Anjali on the practice of dharana, concentration, the sixth step on the Eightfold Path of Yoga, it brings to mind movement. The mind likes to do, to move, to think. The mind is in constant movement. In Meditations for Yoga, Gurani Anjali writes the following: "We are to feel compassion and sorrow for those that are going on a nice swing in Klesherville. We are to let them know that they are sitting on that swing that goes back and forth, back and forth. You know how it feels when you're sitting on a swing. It feels pretty good, doesn't it? It feels really great to fly high in the sky and then dip down and go back and forth, up and down. I used to love that. It's a very nice ride, going back and forth. And sometimes you get so fond of it that you fall asleep on the swing and you're still going, but you're unconscious. This photo is of my brother and grandmother circa 1957. And you can see the smile on my brother's face. He's enjoying it. From birth, we enjoy movement. Anyone who has experienced taking care of a crying baby, a baby who has been fed and changed, what do we do to quiet and comfort that baby? My mother would like to tell me how it was a whole year before I would sleep through the night. My father would pick me up and walk with me. And the minute that he would try and sit in a chair with me, I would start to cry again. I wanted to be walked, movement. Eventually, we learned to sit in stillness. And while we may have learned to sit still in meditation, how do we get our mind to sit as well? The movement of the mind. Sometimes in meditation, we get carried away with our own thoughts. It may even feel like we are watching our own home movie, minus the popcorn. While the mind is in control of the mind, even this presents a dilemma for the meditation practitioner. Who exactly is in charge? We tell ourselves that we are in control of our thoughts, but thoughts at times can compete with each other for our attention. And depending upon who is left in charge, some thoughts may receive greater attention while other thoughts are dismissed. And even when we notice that we've become caught up in our thoughts in the movie that is being projected by your own mind, we want to continue to watch the film to see how the movie ends. When the mind tries to control the mind and direct it back to meditation, we might even become annoyed by the interruption. So we hit the rewind button on our home movie. The moviegoer doesn't want to stop the show. We're enjoying ourselves. As Gurani Anjali laughingly says, do you want to stop it? She reminds us that meditation requires strong determination. She tells us in her book, The Ways of Yoga, do not escape into meditation. Meditation is not to escape life. Gurani Anjali tells us this about the mind. The only way it is at home is when it is absorbed. Now, to have the mind in a constant state of absorption takes total attention and takes a desire that's intent on being absorbed. But the average mind says, why should I be absorbed? If I be absorbed, I'll be dead. There'll be no life in me. What will I do? People will look at me and say, she's mad. As long as you're in a physical body, the physical body has a place. Therefore, the spiritual body has its place. The sacred has a place also. But the mind without the body is no mind without the body. And the body without the mind is no body without the mind. Everything is so connected and interconnected so that we can go into that state of perfection. That is the intention, going into a state of perfection. Going into that state of perfection, you take everything with you because everything is you. But to hold everything, the total sum of your existence, your mind holds the balance. You work on desire first, desire to understand. From understanding, there is appreciation. There is a state of wisdom. And then there is the holding. When there is the holding with love, effort. Why is there effort? The one who is watching you sees effort, but the one who is holding you in the balance, there is an action. What is the most important thing that we desire in the world right now? To feel good, to feel I'm human, to be able to look at the sky and the spaces in the trees and all of creation and open up your arms and feel the whole power of the light. Gurani Anjali asks her students, why should I be absorbed? That unwillingness to walk out on the movie of our own making. One could even say a trepidation, a fear. Gurani Anjali paints a very accurate portrait of the face of that fear. If I be absorbed, I'll be dead. There'll be no life in me. So there has to be a willingness to surrender. a letting go of fear and a letting go of the perception of the multiple images of our own likenesses, the characters we play in the cinema verite of our own lives. Perhaps we fear that moment when the cinematographer says, fade to black, the movie is over, and the ego I ceases to exist. So how do we get there? Dharani Anjali tells us in these words, desire creates a creation. Creation means you have to act, you have to perform. So the creation goes into practice. We practice. That is creation, practicing. Practicing, practicing, practicing to feel that state of perfection. Set yourself a goal and then go after that. Keep working at it. Just to be able to hold the thoughts, just to hold it. Nothing from the outside. Just hold you. Don't hold anything else. Just hold you. You are a part of this world. You are human. You will perform. It is the practice that works. It's not the thinking about it that works. It's the actual practice. When I hear the word practice, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. So when I hear the word practice, I think of Allen Iverson, Hall of Famer, former professional basketball player for the Philadelphia 76ers. He was goaded by the media during an interview after a season-ending loss to the Boston Celtics in a 2002 NBA playoffs. They called out how he had missed one practice earlier in the year. During the post-game interview, Iverson mentions the word practice 26 times, and now the famous quote, "We're talking about practice." But what was ignored by the media was what Iverson went on to say. We're talking about practice, not a game, not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. You see me give everything I got, right? Practice requires effort. Yoga Sutra 1.3 says this, Tatra stitao yatno abhyasaha. Practice requires effort and stability. Practice requires effort. Effort requires intention. In our meditation practice, we create a moment in time and space to hold that which is dear, the sanctity of the present moment. Through sankalpa, the creation of the intentionality to hold the mind. In our book, Ways of Yoga, Dharani Anjali tells us it takes sitting, it takes exercise, it takes intentionality to bring about this understanding of what this mind is. Dharani Anjali provides us with her own sutra, Just Say Om, and shares these words with us. There is such a power in the human voice, and when you open up your mouth and say the phrases of your existence in a most expressible manner, the voice within you, there is an opening, there is a becoming, there is a voice within us, a power within us. It is the power in everybody. Let it out. Even if you have nothing to say Om. And in the saying of Om, everything will begin to flow. Just say Om. And you'll feel the roaring of eternity inside of you coming out. Even if you have nothing to say, just say Om. So before Nike's Just Do It became a motto for action, you have Dharani Anjali's Just Say Om. Saying Om expresses that which cannot be put into words, the ineffable expressed. We meditate to find that elusive truth of our existence. We don't need to leave home to find it. We carry it with us. Looking to the words of T.S. Eliot, we shall not cease from exploration. And in the end of all our exploring, will to be arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We didn't have to travel anywhere to get there. We were already there. We just didn't know it. We have to get to know it. Sit and get acquainted. The coming and going and coming and going of the mind that is always wandering. The mind only finds its way home when it is absorbed. And just like Dorothy, we don't need to travel anywhere to find our way home. You're already there. We just didn't know where to look. Thank you. just say them. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, if you could undo this, the stop share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Stop share.
Yeah.
Okay.